When you find your wedding ring in the trash, you don't cry right away. You stand there holding that small gold band between your fingers, and something inside you goes completely still. For 37 years, I'd worn that ring every single day. And now it was sitting under coffee grounds and yesterday's leftovers, tossed away like it meant nothing. That's the moment I knew my marriage was already over. I just hadn't been told yet. My name is Margaret, and until 3 months ago, I thought I understood my life. Richard and I had built everything together, raised 2 sons, paid off a mortgage, survived his heart surgery and my mother's long decline. We weren't passionate anymore, but we were partners, or so I believed. Richard worked in commercial real estate. I'd been a dental hygienist until I retired at 62. We lived comfortably in a 4-bedroom colonial outside Charlotte, the kind of house with good bones and a garden I'd tended for decades. Our sons were grown, living their own lives in different cities. It was supposed to be our time now. Richard had been traveling more for work. Regional conferences, he said, property tour in Florida. I didn't mind. I had my book club, my volunteer shifts at the library, my Wednesday morning walks with Janet from next door. When he was home, we fell into easy routines: morning coffee on the porch, shared dinners, evening news, nothing dramatic. Just the quiet comfort of a long marriage. But looking back, I can see the small changes. The way he showered as soon as he got home from trips. How he'd started closing his laptop when I walked into the room. The new cologne, the gym membership he suddenly cared about at 64. I told myself it was healthy. Men his age needed purpose, needed to feel vital. I was being a supportive wife. I was being a fool. It happened on a Tuesday morning in late August. Richard had left early for the office. I was tidying up after breakfast, taking out the garbage from the kitchen bin when I saw it. Just a glint of gold near the bottom of the bag. At first, I thought it was a bottle cap. But when I pulled it out and wiped away the coffee grounds, my heart stopped. My wedding ring, the one I'd taken off the night before to do dishes. The one I always left on the windowsill above the sink to dry overnight. The ring Richard had slipped on my finger in 1988 in a small church ceremony with 23 guests and my mother crying in the front pew. I stood there in my kitchen, this emotional story unfolding in my head like a movie I didn't want to watch. Someone had deliberately taken my ring from the windowsill and thrown it away, and the only other person in this house was my husband. My hands started shaking, not from sadness yet, from something colder, recognition. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. I cleaned the ring carefully, dried it, and put it back on my finger. Then I did something I'd never done before. I went upstairs to Richard's home office and I looked through his desk. Richard had always been meticulous about money. He handled our finances, paid the bills, managed our investments. I'd trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? We were married. What was his was mine, that's what I thought. The desk drawers were locked, but I knew where he kept the key, taped under his file cabinet, a hiding place he'd used for 20 years and thought I didn't know about. My hands were steady now. I felt calm, almost detached as I opened the first drawer. Bank statements for accounts I didn't recognize. Credit cards in his name only. Property tax bills for a condo in Boca Raton that I'd never heard of. And tucked in the back, a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring, not mine, new, expensive, sitting in fresh packaging from a jeweler in Fort Myers. The receipt was dated 3 weeks ago, $4,700. I sat down in his leather chair and I finally let myself understand. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This wasn't a phase. My husband was building a completely separate life and he was trying to erase me from this one. The wedding ring in the trash wasn't carelessness, it was practice. He was rehearsing my erasure. The pattern reveals itself. Over the next week, I became a detective in my own home. I watched Richard differently now, tracking his patterns like I was studying a stranger. And once you start looking, the truth doesn't hide very well. His phone was always face down. He took calls in the garage, said it was work stress, needed privacy. When I asked about his Florida trips, he gave vague answers about market research and client development. He'd started talking about downsizing, selling the house, maybe moving somewhere warmer. For your joints, he said, the winters are getting harder on you. But my joints were fine. And I'd never said I wanted to leave Charlotte, leave my friends, leave the garden I'd spent decades building. This wasn't about me at all. It was about him erasing our shared life so he could start a new one. I checked our joint account statements online. He'd been moving money, not huge amounts that would alarm me, but steady transfers of $3,000 to $5,000 every month for the past year. $60-some thousand gone. Into accounts I couldn't access, accounts I wasn't named on. Then I found the emails. He'd gotten careless, left his laptop open when he went to shower one evening. I didn't even plan to look. But there it was right on the screen, an email exchange with someone named Denise. Casual, affectionate, talking about paint colors for their place and dinner plans for Labor Day weekend. Can't wait to start our real life together, she'd written. Just a few more months of patience. Richard had replied, I'm handling things at home. She won't be a problem, trust me. I closed the laptop carefully, went downstairs, made myself a cup of tea with hands that barely shook at all. This was real, this was happening, and I needed to stop thinking like a wife and start thinking like a survivor. The next morning, I called our accountant. Not Richard's business accountant, our personal one, the man who'd prepared our joint tax returns for 15 years. His name was Tom, and he'd known both of us since we were clients in our 40s. If anyone understood the full picture of our finances, it was him. Tom, I said when he picked up, I need to talk to you about something sensitive, and I need you to keep this conversation confidential from Richard. There was a pause, then, Margaret, what's going on? I told him everything, the ring in the trash, the hidden accounts, the property in Florida I'd never heard of, the money transfers. Tom listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Margaret, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you safe? Physically, yes, but financially. That's what I'm worried about, Tom said. Listen to me carefully. Based on what you're describing, Richard might be trying to hide marital assets. That's serious. And if he's planning to file for divorce, he could be positioning himself to claim you have less entitlement than you actually do. My stomach dropped. Can he do that? He can try, but not if we act first. Tom's voice was firm now, all business. How quickly can you come to my office? I was there within an hour. Tom spread papers across his conference table, years of tax returns, account statements, property records. Things I should have been paying attention to but had trusted Richard to handle. That trust felt like the stupidest mistake of my life. Here's what we know, Tom said. You and Richard own this house jointly. You're on the deed. But this condo in Florida, it's in his name only, purchased 2 years ago. He's been using marital assets to fund a separate life. In North Carolina, that's a problem for him. Tom pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. You need a divorce attorney, immediately, someone aggressive who understands asset protection. And we need to do a full forensic accounting of every account, every property, every investment. If Richard has been hiding money, we need to find it now before he moves it somewhere we can't trace. I don't want to be vindictive, I said quietly. I just want what's fair. Fair is you getting half of everything you built together, Tom replied. Fair is him not getting to throw your ring in the trash and walk away with the life you both funded. This isn't about revenge, Margaret. This is about protecting yourself from someone who's already protecting himself from you. He gave me 3 attorney names. I called the first one from the parking lot. Her name was Linda Bradshaw, and she could see me that afternoon. Before I drove home, I stopped at the bank and opened a separate account in my name only. Then I transferred exactly half of what was left in our joint checking, not to hide it, but to protect it. Tom had been clear. Document everything, secure your share, and don't tip your hand until your attorney says it's time. Going home that evening was surreal. Richard was in the kitchen making pasta, humming along to some song on the radio. He smiled when I came in, asked about my day like we were still a normal couple in a normal marriage. Ran some errands, I said, had lunch with Janet. It wasn't technically a lie. I texted Janet from my car, told her I needed to talk soon. She'd responded immediately, "Whatever you need, I'm here." Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, everything looked the same. Morning coffee, shared dinners, polite conversation about nothing important. Richard had no idea I'd found his emails, discovered his accounts, hired an attorney. He thought I was still the trusting wife who didn't ask questions, but privately I was building a case. Linda had me document everything, take photos of statements, print emails, record dates and times of his trips. We filed a motion to freeze assets, preventing Richard from moving or hiding any more money. We demanded full financial disclosure, and we prepared for the conversation I knew was coming, the one where Richard would try to control the narrative. It came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after I'd found my ring in the trash, Richard sat me down after dinner. He had that serious expression men get when they're about to deliver bad news they think is actually good. "Margaret, we need to talk about the future," he said. "I've been thinking a lot about our marriage, about where we are. I'm not happy anymore. I don't think you are either." He waited for me to argue, to plead. Instead, I said, "Go on." That seemed to surprise him. He faltered slightly, then continued. "I think it's time we acknowledge this isn't working. We've grown apart. It happens. I think we should consider a separation. Maybe sell the house, split things fairly, move on with our lives." "Split things fairly," I repeated. "Like the condo in Boca Raton, would we split that fairly too?" His face went pale. For the first time in our marriage, I watched Richard truly panic. "I don't know what." "Or the $60,000 you've moved into separate accounts. The diamond ring you bought 3 weeks ago, the emails to Denise where you talk about starting your real life together." Richard stood up abruptly. "You went through my private things." "You threw my wedding ring in the trash," I said, my voice eerily calm. "That's when private ended." What followed was ugly. Richard went from denial to anger to bargaining in the span of an hour. He tried to explain the condo as an investment property, tried to claim the money transfers were for our retirement, tried to say Denise was just a friend and I was overreacting to normal correspondence. But I didn't argue with him. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to stay or work things out. I just sat there, hands folded, and let him talk himself in circles. Finally, I said, "I've filed for divorce. My attorney has already submitted financial discovery requests. If you've hidden anything else, we're going to find it. And if you've used our marital assets to fund your relationship with Denise, the court is going to want to know about it." "You can't do this," Richard said. "We can work this out. I made mistakes, but we don't need lawyers. I already have one, and she's very good at her job." Richard stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. Because the woman he'd been married to, the one who trusted, who didn't ask questions, who believed his excuses, she died the moment I found that ring in the trash. The woman sitting across from him now was someone different. Someone who'd finally learned that self-respect mattered more than keeping the peace. The divorce took 11 months. Richard fought it at first, tried to claim I was being unreasonable, that we could do a friendly split without all the legal fees. But Linda was relentless. We traced every dollar, every account, every asset. Turned out Richard had been planning this for nearly 3 years, slowly moving money, setting up his new life while I gardened and volunteered and trusted. In the end, the court didn't look kindly on his behavior. I got the house, half of all accounts, and half the value of the Florida condo, which Richard had to buy out since it was titled in his name alone. I also got a portion of his pension and a lump sum settlement for what the judge called dissipation of marital assets, the money he'd spent building a life with someone else while still married to me. It wasn't about winning. It was about justice. About the 37 years I'd invested in a partnership that turned out to be one-sided. About the garden I'd tended, the home I'd maintained, the life I'd built that Richard had decided was disposable. The day the divorce was finalized, I had my wedding ring melted down and made into a simple pendant. I wear it sometimes, not as a symbol of marriage, but as a reminder I survived. I protected myself. I chose dignity over denial. I still live in the house, the one with good bones in the garden that's never looked better. Richard moved to Florida, married Denise 6 months after our divorce was final. I heard they're already having problems, but that's not my concern anymore. His choices aren't my responsibility now. What I learned from this family drama is simple. Trust is beautiful, but blind trust is dangerous. Know your finances, know what's in your name. Pay attention to the small changes, the patterns that don't quite add up. And if you ever find yourself picking your wedding ring out of the trash, don't waste time crying. Call your accountant, call your attorney, call your best friend. Then protect yourself with every tool you have, because nobody else will do it for you. That's the truth about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It teaches you that the person you need to rely on most is yourself. If this real-life story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more honest conversations about relationships, resilience, and starting over, subscribe to Soulbyte for new stories every day.